From Chicago's CAN TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there. Welcome to another edition of Chicago Newsroom right here on CAN TV. I am Ken Davis, and this is the day after we had an election here in the United States, you may have noticed. And as we are sitting at this table right now recording the program that you're watching, the transition is beginning. Donald Trump's his airplane is parked at Reagan National. He motorcaded into the White House, and as we're speaking, he and Barack Obama are in the Oval Office, and the transition begins. And wouldn't we wish that he was wearing a wire when we went in there, because we just have to know what they said to each other. So when this kind of an upset happens and things just aren't exactly what you were expecting that they would be, and maybe you're on the losing side, what you got to do is you got to reach out to the comfort of your friends. And that's what I've done today. I've called 3 of my old friends to sit around the table and just try to figure out what the heck happened on Tuesday. I am referring to Delmarie Cobb. And Delmarie Cobb, of course, has her own company that deals with political work, and we're happy to have you here. Chris Robling is joining us. Chris Robling, also a political consultant, political activist, and Bruce DuMont from Beyond the Beltway. Bruce, of course, has all 3 of these folks have been on the show many times before, but it was on July 24th. Back last summer when we had Bruce DuMont sitting at this table, and Bruce DuMont said the following.
At this particular point in time, I believe that Donald Trump will be elected president of the United States.
So Bruce, why the heck did you say that?
Well, because I believed it at the moment, and I did say at that moment in time, and it was based on just a general looking at the map, talking with some of my affiliates in Youngstown, Ohio, having been there a number of times, that you could feel what was happening. I went to I went to the aborted rally that was in Chicago. I was at the rally, the Trump rally in California, the one that led to the first violence that we saw, on the campaign trail. And there was a sense, you had to be at one of these rallies to understand the level of frustration that was going on. And when you looked at that map, he said he was going to, focus on the blue states and the Rust Belt. That's what the campaign strategist said early. And I sensed that it was happening. So I wasn't totally surprised by what happened on Tuesday.
I bet you were, Delmarie.
No, I was surprised that Hillary Clinton lost. It was a big surprise to everybody. Mm-hmm. But I never thought that she was the presumptive winner. I always thought it was a race and that it was going to go down to the wire, and nothing was ever taken for granted on my part because, one, as a woman, you're already breaking the mold, and so there's no way you can take anything that's that transformational for granted.
Yeah, one of the thousands of statistics that we're being bombarded with in the last 48 hours, I found it really interesting that white women with no degree went 62 to 34 for Trump.
And many of her largest detractors, and I said that all during the campaign, were white women, surprisingly. Mm-hmm. So, for whatever reason, and it's not because necessarily that she was a flawed candidate. I think it's a very high threshold in this country for women to support other women, especially, we believe the okey doke as well, oftentimes. And you see that always in each group. African Americans do it, so all groups do it, Latinos do it. So, you have to convince people that you can run a corporation, you can run a business, you can run the presidency.
I have to,
Mr. Robling.
I've got to respectfully add to Delmarie's point there by referencing the incidence of voting for Hillary Clinton among African American females. Mm-hmm. So you have degree-holding African American females, 92% for Hillary Clinton. Non-degree holding African American females, 94% for Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. And their Caucasian counterparts weren't anywhere close to that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a internal contradiction that the Democrats are going to have to face. It's not a big key to the ultimate, what was going on here. But I think that it is vitally important to appreciate the extent to which, notwithstanding, defying all of the norms, boorish behavior, horrendous videos or audio tapes or whatever about Trump and things like this, some really unpalatable actions on Trump's part, he was connecting with people in very serious ways to motivate their support.
If I could just, as an African-American woman, I'd like to respond to that as to why we supported Hillary Clinton. Because as African-American women, first of all, black men got the vote before women, and white women got the vote before black women. So black women are used to being mistreated. It's not that we like being mistreated, but we're accustomed to being mistreated. So much of what we saw Hillary undergo is something that we deal with every day.
Interesting. Yeah.
So for us to see her be resilient, to see her take the blows and stand up and keep going and brush them off and not miss a beat, that's something that we can innately relate to, because in our lives every day, in what I do, majority of my clients are men. So I'm not dealing with racism every day, but I am dealing with sexism every day, because they'll hire me to be their consultant and then want to treat me like the secretary. So I deal with that every day, and that's what black women saw.
I think the bigger, broader issue is, in all due respect, that it wasn't specifically about gender or race. It was about the frustrations of those men and women who felt that they had been left behind. They had been left behind by the elite media. They had been left behind by the establishment. They had been left behind by the Democratic Party that supported NAFTA 15 years ago. They felt left out. And Donald Trump was saying publicly what they were saying in the bars and the living rooms for many, many years, since the Ross Perot period. And finally someone was out there saying it. And then the other point was, every single knock, as bad a job as I think the national mainstream media did in this campaign, every knock became a boost. It was very similar to what was happening in Chicago with Harold Washington. Every knock he got was a boost. And his goal in 1983 was to get every single black vote out. And basically, I think Donald Trump, that was his goal in this campaign. And if you look at the map of the United States, he did a hell of a job on turnout.
But you can't dismiss gender and race, because much of the slogans, "Make America Great Again," as an African American, that didn't resonate with us in the same way that it resonated.
No,
Delmarie,
I'm
not
you
going to
can't
write
say
it
how
out.
it resonated to me.
No, I'm not. I'm
So-
going to say that Trump beat Mitt Romney in the African American community. That Trump beat Mitt Romney in the Hispanic vote. That Trump
Definitely in the Hispanic vote,
that
significantly.
Trump, very significantly, and not insignificantly in the African American community. And Trump is the first. I could recall Jack Kemp, but he never made it past the primaries. No. Trump had the greatest commitment to campaigning in the African American community of any Republican candidate for president. No, it wasn't 2 or 3 visits. It was probably about a dozen or more visits.
Well,
but it was also the time spent in his speeches.
But the fact that
what
it wasn't.
he said in his speeches, what the hell do you all have to lose? I mean, that is not an appeal to African Americans. And
it might have been it might not have been to you, Delmarie.
No,
it might have been to some.
You know, I'm not disconnected from the black community.
I know that. I don't
just
mean
because
to.
I was a Hillary supporter.
No, I don't mean that.
Or a Democrat. The other thing is, as I was saying, to African Americans, Make America Great Again spoke to when women and people of color knew their place.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that. That's one of the questions I had today. If there's anything that the four of us all have in common, it is that we have a lot of experience crafting messages and evaluating messages. And I got to tell you that those 4 words are probably the most effective slogan that I've seen, certainly in my professional career. Make America Great Again. At the same time, it means absolutely nothing, but you can hang on it, your life experiences, and it becomes meaningful to you.
And also, on the other side, Stronger together means nothing.
Means nothing.
It
It has,
mush.
it has no.
And-
all right.
And there never was, if I may use the term colligatory concept, there never was any big concept for Hillary's campaign, except more of same. That was it. It
Well,
was.
and similarly for Trump, it was
No.
it was like
We
we all know Alderman Ed Buss. You know, it's like keep it like it was. I mean that was. That's,
Well, I'm not.
it-
I'm not going to
make America great again.
I think Make America Great Again achieved a contextuality and a specificity throughout the evolution of the campaign, so that what started as a slogan became a battle cry. And it wasn't the only one. I mean, he ended up with this, almost by just his innate sort of connection with the audience, he said, "Drain the swamp." And he recited the history of that phrase, which he was chatting with some people, and he said, we got to drain the swamp, and they loved it. So then he was up on the stage, and he used it. He said, we're going to go to Washington and drain the swamp, and the crowd went wild.
All
It
of
became.
this was red meat for his supporters. I mean, it was
That-
code.
isn't that what
it goes-
messages are supposed to be?
Exactly, and I don't have a problem with that. It's code, and we all know this code, and we know what code is. I mean, Barack Obama used code when he said, "It's our turn. Turn the page. Washington of the past." I mean, I know when it's cold when it's Democrats, and I know when it's cold when it's Republicans. And so that's what that was. And a lot
What
of
was
it.
the code for Stronger Together? Explain that to
No,
me.
there wasn't any code. I didn't say that was a great slogan.
Okay, no.
I didn't say that was a great slogan. It was a slogan to offset what the interpretation of Make
Right.
a Great
It was a
America
reactive-
again.
it was
That's
a
what it
reactive
was.
slogan.
It was one is divisive and one is bringing us together.
Trump wants to tear us apart. We're stronger together.
What is tearing
But
us
the
apart
other
about
part-
making us great again?
But the other part of that.
Don't put politics into this. It's not about politics, as
other-
we're saying. These are slogans that make you think things, right? And depending on who you are, you can react to it a different way. I'm saying it was sheer brilliance.
Okay.
But also, Ken, keep in mind, for those people who felt they were left behind, white working class voters, I mean, for decades, not just 4 years, for decades, they felt they were left behind. They really do want to make America great again. They would like to see a return to steel mills and jobs.
And not at the expense of African Americans,
No.
and not at the expense of
Well,
Hispanics,
nobody's-
and not at the expense of women. I
Well,
mean, the whole thing, and
unless-
not at the
but
But that
expense
was
of
the whole
Hispanics.
campaign
No, it
was about
not the
at
whole
the expense
campaign.
of all those
I'm sorry,
people.
it was not.
And-
Delmarie. I think
and
that's the
today-
campaign you saw. I'm not sure that's the campaign that was run.
Because that's the thing about Make America Great Again. It depends on who you are.
But let me
Speaks
give
to you no matter what
I want
you
to
think.
put some meat on this bone here
All right,
that Bruce has talked about.
Although maybe
have
you
a-
would also tell us what year that was, that America was great.
Well,
I can't remember.
I've got
Was
a
it 1948?
a friend of ours lives on the north side, very successful lady, a serial entrepreneur. She's now in elder care. She has a sister who's not at all, hasn't achieved any of the sort of socioeconomic status. She married somebody who was in the manufacturing business. They had a big factory down in Kentucky at which he worked. And 5-6 years ago, the owners of that factory announced, we're going to move this to Mexico, and you've got 90 days or whatever. And so the guy loses his job. Her sister is this guy's wife, and she's a registered nurse, and she is working every hour that she can get up to the limits imposed by Obamacare, because whatever health provider she's working for doesn't want her to work beyond the limit where they have to provide her health care. And her husband is making half of what he used to make at the factory. Okay. Now, I think we've all heard stories like this. We all know
them.
there are people like that. Okay. Here is my surprise. Those people were utterly unconnected to the Democrat dominance in Washington. They were utterly
to the Republican dominance.
Well,
in
let me just
Washington.
let me.
Okay, but let's-
They had no
the
fealty.
bigger story, Chris, is that it wasn't. It was everyone.
Okay, they had no fealty. They had no loyalty to Barack Obama or to his agenda or to a continuation of that agenda in the aegis of Hillary Clinton. They didn't have
Or
that,
to any of the
which made
candidates
them
who ran.
available. That made them available to Trump.
Ken, you also made a point. You said, well, yeah, but the Republicans were listening. That was the magic of Donald Trump. Donald Trump he spent as much time blasting and arguing against Republicans
Yes.
as he did against Democrats.
Thank
the fact that
goodness.
this guy
Thank
is a populist, he didn't have to worry about his conservative base and this base. He said, "Hey, I'm going to tell it like it is."
Right.
I think another part of it is he really went out there. He made it a war on political correctness.
Yes.
That's also part of, I think, the great success that he's had. And so he goes into the White House today, actually literally today, with fewer strings than any candidate in the history of the country. Fewer strings.
Except maybe Eisenhower. But yeah, I
Right.
agree.
Is that-
He really has no. He's not
Beholden to anybody.
He's even a George W. Bush or a Barack Obama took office as a very young man comparatively. Reagan. All of these guys came out of a political thing, and they had political either restraints or supports, or Bruce uses the term strings. There were political elements. I honestly think that Trump, having first defied the Republican establishment,
Right.
before he defied the Democratic establishment, and throughout defying the media establishment. So he's defying everybody, okay?
All the way, business.
And breaking a lot of rules along the way.
but-
I think that's the kind of administration we'll see.
Two things. Cambridge Analytica, which is who did Donald Trump's polling, they said that the majority of his support today was older, whiter, male, and rural. So we cannot all of a sudden sit here and pretend that his supporters were another group. That was the genesis of his support. Now it grew out of that, but we understand that the genesis of his support was that group. We saw it.
Well, Van Jones on CNN called it the white lash. I don't know if you guys saw that.
That was hideous of him.
It may have been hideous of him, but
But it was no more hideous than everything that Trump said all during the campaign.
No, I don't think. I deny
Here's
there's
why.
any truth.
Here's why the national news media and the pollsters missed it, because as I said when I was on here in July, that group, including ourselves, because we live in one of the bluest cities in the bluest state, one of the bluest states now. We don't know anybody that disagrees. We don't go to social parties where people disagree with us. And so we look around and say, well, it's got to be like this. And the pollsters miss that. And certainly the pundits miss it. Because when you talk about older, whiter, rural, they don't talk to old, white, rural people. They really don't.
Right.
Unless it's early, in Iowa for the caucuses, they send somebody out to interview
some
rural
pancakes.
white people.
Well, and may I say, not only is everything that Bruce just said absolutely true,
Thank you.
but in this
I agree that it's
election,
absolutely true, yes.
Thank you. In this election, unlike all other elections before it, we had this, and it must have been very painful for our friend Delmarie, but we had this endless drip, drip, drip of emails. Either the FBI files were coming out on a Friday, or WikiLeaks was coming out on emails on Tuesday, or there was another revelation of this or that. Well, hold on, let me finish.
I don't care. I just don't care.
I'm sorry, but when you read those, and I think that what came through from those is utter disdain, if not contempt, for the regular people out there on the map, someplace between Los Angeles and Boston,
Well, the idea
The
Massachusetts.
same thing could be said for Trump. He doesn't care about little people who live out in Iowa either. But he just happened to.
I beg your
disagree
pardon.
with that.
I
I disagree
completely
with that.
disagree with
when
you.
you don't pay your,
Have you been to
when
any
you-
of his
when you don't
campaign
pay your
events?
vendors, it doesn't matter if you're in New York or in Iowa. If you don't pay your vendors, the small businesses, and as a small business, you know that when we put in the work, the only thing we can charge for as a small business is your time and your talent. If you put in the time and then don't get paid for it, what the hell do you have at the end of the day? You've got to start all over, try to run around trying to find some business to make up for what you lost.
Nobody cared about that.
Right,
They didn't care about that.
Nobody cared about any of that,
th-
and
th-
all of that is relevant because when you're a farmer and you're talking about, or a coal miner, and you're sitting here talking about a woman in elder care, and these are people who are struggling, and here's a man who doesn't pay his vendors. You mean to tell me there's a disconnect? And there was a disconnect because it was all about as he said, he could do a cannon or kill somebody on Fifth Avenue and nothing would happen because they were determined it was a backlash. They were determined that they did not want Obama, and this was also, and their economics. It was two things. It was race and it was economics.
No, it was the level of frustration, the depth and breadth of frustration of tens of millions of Americans that said enough is enough. I'm tired of an establishment political class of a media elite. I'm tired of people forgetting about me. And Donald Trump went out there with those 4 words, "Make America Great Again." That was simple to them. They didn't care about these.
I agree with you.
But when America if any other candidate had gone through surviving the Billy Bush tapes, I mean, if you survive that, the level of hatred for your opponent is massive. That's what we saw here.
If America has a cold, black people have pneumonia. So all this stuff that you're talking about,
why does everything have to come back to race?
No, but I'm saying we're talking about supporters who supported him. So that's why it's coming back to race.
Let me ask you this: why didn't a greater number of African Americans support Hillary Clinton? There was a drop off.
Yes, there was a drop off.
That's right. Well, why? I mean, when Donald Trump focused on what was happening in the city of Chicago, did African Americans living in the city of Chicago, did at least some of them say, you know what, he may be onto something here?
He did not appeal. You do not appeal to people negatively. So
well,
you tell me
he goes in with a positive message.
He did not have a positive message. He said, "You with you in your neighborhoods, no schools. Your schools are no good. You have no jobs. Half of you are out of work. The other half of you can't walk down the street. You're being killed."
Do no blacks believe that? Do no blacks believe that?
I'm half. So
I said no. I said, are there any blacks who believe what Donald Trump said? Any?
Why would we when it's not true? Why would we believe
Well, it's not true in your opinion.
No, it's not true.
If you live on the south and west side and you can't walk outside of your house because your kids may get shot, you know, when Donald Trump is saying some of these, you know what they say, you know what, maybe there's something to this.
You know, what I find amazing, Bruce, is how is it that you know more about the environment that I live in.
Never,
I live in a
never
black
said
neighborhood.
I did. Never said I did.
Never lived
Aren't we
in.
supposed to discuss these things?
No, but I'm saying
hold
we
on a
are
second.
discussing.
Allow me to discuss something here, okay? Since Barack Obama took office almost 8 years ago, we've seen an increase in poverty that has been disproportionately distributed to the black community by no less than 8 million, okay? 8 million more Americans are now in poverty than the day, hold on a second, Ken, than the day he took office, okay? Now, you might not like that. You might say he came in after George Bush broke the bank or whatever, but the truth is he started 8 years later, 50 million people are in poverty, 8 million blacks.
Can you at least concede that the United States economy is significantly better today than it was when Barack Obama came into office?
It's not nearly where it should be,
I
and
didn't
we've
ask
got
that.
the vote
I didn't
results.
Ask that. I said, can
no,
you
I
at
don't
least
think it is.
concede
No,
that it's,
honestly, no. I don't think it is significantly better.
This is part of the conversation that's really annoying to me.
Okay.
It's like.
I got to get back to the Van Jones
right,
thing.
okay.
I do want to say, the Van Jones, I totally discount Van Jones's statement, and I call it hideous for the following reason. I don't believe this was backward looking at Barack Obama. I believe this was forward looking at what people thought they were going to get out of Hillary Clinton. I believe this was...
Wait, say that again. I missed that. It's forward looking at what
I think that
they
Delmarie's statement is, and I believe that Delmarie could speak for herself. I believe Van Jones was saying a white lash means this was a backlash against our first African-American president. I believe that's what Van was saying.
Do you think?
Okay?
Would you be willing to concede that there is a significant population in the United States that has looked upon the Barack Obama administration as just a kind of a horrible aberration, that it shouldn't have happened?
I'm a member of that group.
I am not.
I think that Barack Obama. I think Barack Obama was.
Not
for racial. I think Barack Obama was utterly unprepared to be president, and we've got the record to show for it. And I think that Hillary Clinton would have been a disaster as president. And people were constantly trying to say that somehow Donald Trump, because of stupid remarks with Billy Bush, or the fact he had 3 wives or something, that he was some sort of social reprobate. I was saying, because of her failure as Secretary of State to prevent Obama from using the red line concept in Syria, We are now looking at more than 200,000 Syrians who've lost their lives. Why isn't she a social reprobate? I believe that Hillary Clinton, for serial lying to the American people, for a pay-to-play scandal at the Clinton Foundation, she's the serial reprobate. She's the person who shouldn't be allowed into polite company.
And so that's where we arrive, isn't it? We arrive at the point where people who have a proclivity to support Hillary Clinton will say, I don't think that was as big a deal as it
Correct.
as it appears to be.
Correct.
And the things that have been brought up about Donald Trump are significant.
Correct.
The other side says, so what? So he did a few of these odds, and he's a guy. It's okay. But those emails, oh my God. So here's the point that's on the table here today. This is why I invited us all here today. Okay. Is there a possibility that Donald Trump can succeed as president? Is it possible that we can put some, if not all of this just really dangerous kind of hatred behind us and de-escalate this thing a little bit? And is there any possibility that Donald Trump could become presidential?
Yes. I think the opportunities are there. I think the first utterance when he became president-elect the other night was an indication of what can be done. I think Hillary's response was excellent. I thought the president's response from the White House, I think they've all been very positive. I think they're all speaking to the opportunity and the history and the tradition of the country is to come together after a very bitterly fought election. And by the way, because Donald Trump comes with few ideological strings to him, I'm going to make another statement. You can put this in the tape machine as well. Donald Trump, I think, is, when it comes to the Supreme Court, he's going to keep the conservatives happy for as long as he's president. In every other decision he makes, I think a lot of conservatives are not going to like what Donald Trump says. I think Donald Trump is going to be a president that is far more moderate, maybe in some cases far more liberal. He's going to be Nixonian in the political sense, not in the devious sense. Nixon did a lot of things that really ticked off conservatives, and yet many people, notwithstanding Watergate, thought that Nixon was a great president. I think that is the line, and I would say the same thing about Eisenhower. That is the model that I think Donald Trump is going to follow. And again, he's going to have people in the House of Representatives, in the Senate. To me, that's going to be one of the interesting things to watch, because we're looking at an era where there may be 3 Republican parties.
Okay,
Bruce, I agree largely with what you say. I don't think that Trump fits into any established, known, recognized category of republicanism, okay? And I think that's part of the problem that folks had on the Republican side. They also had another problem, which was his demeanor and deportment. But I also agree with Bruce that all of the speeches since the night of the election by Trump and Secretary Clinton and President Obama have been terrific, okay? I think he can succeed if he's very focused. And I think this is what the nation needs. I think the nation he gave the speech in Gettysburg, which if you haven't read it, it's time to go back and read it, because that's his contract with America. And that's very specific about tax reform, about trade issues, about entitlements. He went right down the line about repeal and replace Obamacare. So he went right down the list on his issues at the Gettysburg speech. That should be studied by everybody. But if he, and I believe that because he has no political ties on him, he can do this in a way that a Ted Cruz could not have done it, or for that matter, even a Kasich. If he invites Democrats to come sit, be a part of this conversation. Here are the things I talked about in Gettysburg. What elements do you want to contribute to that? What do you want to withdraw?
So in other words, a guy who was a Democrat for much of his life and then became a Republican just because that was the convenient thing to do, and who really has been more apolitical during most of his known time on this planet, that is somebody, that's an empty slate upon which many things can be written.
And I think, and that's what I said yesterday about which Donald Trump are we going to see.
Right.
And we don't know that yet. We know that we saw one Donald Trump that ran in order to get elected. He was a Democrat the majority of his life, as you said. He ran as a Republican because it was expedient to do so. And many of his beliefs are moderate or lean to the left. And so it will be interesting to see which Donald Trump shows up to govern.
I think the one we're going to see is the one that he's also a great marketer. He knows
More
what
than
to
anything,
say.
he's a
Knows
great
what to
marketer.
say, and I would hope that in the first 100 days, let's keep him on teleprompter.
Yeah.
Keep him on teleprompter,
And keep the Twitter
Keep the
account
Twitter
away.
account.
and
Right,
keep
right.
Kelly Conway close to that administration. But the other point is speaking on, one of the surprising things he received with all the discussion about the Hispanic vote. He received 30% of the Hispanic vote.
yeah.
That's almost what George Bush got when he ran in 2000, almost. So when you get almost a third of the Hispanic vote, there is an opportunity for growth there. I think there could be an opportunity for growth within the African American community. You may disagree with that. If Donald Trump delivers on some of the promises of what he wants to do to improve life for African Americans living in the city of Chicago and in the urban areas and to do something to reduce crime, he's not going to do it in 100 days or overnight,
What's he
like you
going to
said.
do other than
I don't
stop
know.
and frisk?
I don't know.
What can a
part-
president do if
part of it
Barack
could be-
Obama couldn't do it?
Because Barack Obama never took the bully pulpit of the presidency to talk about people being murdered in his own hometown. Never did it.
never did.
But
Donald
he
Trump
shied
was the
away.
one that gave him, that put the focus there.
First of all, I don't have a problem working with Republicans, and I have had to do it in my career to advance issues. And so I have no problem working with someone who's the president. I am fighting you when you are in a campaign. Once you're
Yes.
elected,
Right.
I understand the position you have and the power you have, and I'm going to, like Donald Trump, I will come to you with ideas and try to compromise on how we can advance things. If a Donald Trump has some ideas and has some opportunities to make life better for African Americans, I will be right there helping him. I have no problem with that.
Right, right.
It just so
what the
happens
campaign
that
should be.
Omarosa is a friend of mine.
Really?
And she is right there with him. So it's not like I don't have someone in that camp
You'll
that I
get your
can pick
calls
up the
returned.
phone
You're gonna
and call.
Exactly.
By the way, if I could just one other particular point is that because of those relationships, Trump may find it easier to get along with some Democrats in the House and Senate than Republicans.
Especially when he-
I looked at the list of Republican senators that were reelected the other night, and you had Ted Cruz but when you put Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and John McCain and Marco Rubio and Jeff Flake and Ben Sass,
Right.
I would say that half of the Republican Senate, when they have that first Republican caucus at the White House, half of those people aren't even going to want to shake hands with the president because they didn't vote for him.
Right.
And Donald Trump will remember that, and he should remember that.
So, all right. So here's the thing. We are faced with a situation where this new president could indeed do those things.
Right.
Is there a parallel to what we were all saying about Rahm Emanuel when Rahm Emanuel came into office? Here's a guy who didn't come up through the Ward organization. He wasn't born in the 11th Ward. He doesn't have those ties to
The less said
Chicago.
about Rahm, the better, in general and specifically here today.
But
on this
could
program, by
could
us,
Chicago make?
including
Make Chicago great again?
So I guess the answer is no.
Rahm is sui generis and really a case of his own, and I don't think we should.
I think the one thing, however, is
But
bringing
Rahm
up
was threatening, Trump today, or yesterday. I mean, Rahm was getting out. Excuse me, I don't mean.
No,
But I
that's
mean,
all right.
Rahm saw fit on this of all days. This is the cycle, the inner terror of that psyche.
Well, he said we have to. He said the president's got to reach out and reach out to the people that voted against him. Well, of course he does, but he doesn't owe anything to the people that voted against him.
No,
He doesn't owe it.
he can hold a mirror up to Rahm and say, "I'm going to do it exactly as you did." On the other hand, let's not kid ourselves. But then on
They
the
may
other
put
side,
that sign up, by the way.
I wanted-
The Trump
I-
sign
That's
right
what I was
back
just
up.
going to ask. Are they putting the sign back up? That's
Not
all I
yet,
want to know.
but,
Okay. All right.
But this does get to this element of Trump, which I believe is far more significant today than it was, say, 6 weeks ago. And that is, he came to, as an example, just we happen to be in Chicago, it's a good example. He shows up here 10 years ago. Actually, it was more like 15, 18 years ago. He's got $500 million in his pocket. He wants to build a world-class building, which is a non-trivial act. And he got a very difficult site because the Sun-Times site was actually very challenging for a variety of reasons. Yeah, and
Transverse concrete. It was a
Yeah,
very difficult build.
they're a very difficult building, and he knew that he was operating, which amazed me. And this was my the first time I really thought, wow, there's something to this guy, was when he hired Adrian Smith. and not some schlarchitect, but a real star in the architecture business. And long story short, 7 years later, he's spent $450 million, and we've got a 90-story beautiful building. Whether you like the name on it or not, I mean, the building itself is very beautiful.
Stands out in the skyline.
And to get that done, he parachutes in here, and who does he hire for his
Ed Burke.
Ed Burke. Mm-hmm. Okay. And who does he work with? And when I sat across from him at the City Club lunch, who was sitting to his right hand? Ed Burke. Okay, so this is not a guy who's got a problem. He is not some sort of doctrinaire, up from the greenhouse conservative Republican.
And
who doesn't
when
want to
Mayor
talk.
Daley saw the model of the building, he said, "It's going to have a spire. It's got to have a spire." And he said, "Okay, you'll get your spire." And he put the spire on it.
And I have a story about that as well. A friend of mine who had an office in the Sun-Times building. And apparently he had access to the office. He got access to the office and was able to look out the window and know exactly where he wanted the building built and how he wanted it built, so that when the sign did go up, and if you can see the sign from 24th and Wabash, that's how far the sign goes, and it's perfectly framed, that he came back and said, this is the site I want for my building, because this is the perfect site for my name and everything.
So this is a guy who gets things done.
This is getting too touchy-feely.
Too celebratory.
I think the question is,
We just
the
lost all of our audience.
The institutional elements of the National Democratic Party are going to have to decide where are they going to battle with the new president, and where are they going to agree with the new president.
I also, on that particular subject is, where does, out of the ashes comes a fight for the heart and soul of the party. Mm-hmm. So the future of the Democratic Party, not only in 2 years but in 4 years, is going to be very much something to watch. And a lot of that action is going to take place in the United States Senate. Mm-hmm. Tim Kaine is going to be around for another couple of years. He'll certainly be sort of the moderate, but he doesn't, I don't think he lights any fires, emotional fires.
And he did himself no favors.
Right, he did not do a great job in my view. You also have, obviously, Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. You have Elizabeth Warren. Yeah. Because of their age, they're not likely to be maybe the titular heads. But again, in the speeches that they give, the Democrats, and by the way, beyond that, the Democratic bench is pretty weak. Mm-hmm. It's pretty weak.
Because of Obamacare, and because of the culling that was done by the voters after the vote on Obamacare. I mean, you had a whole generation of young members of the House who were swept away. Then you had a whole generation of senators who were swept away. And now, even this year, the Republicans won 3 governorships. So our number of governorships is something like 34 or 7.
I'm fully aware of the strength of the Republican Party all the way down. However, isn't it also true, what's being said today, that it's not just the Democrats who are going to have their heart-to-heart talk with themselves, so are the Republicans.
Absolutely.
Because what Donald Trump represented to the Republicans is almost exactly the same thing he represented to the Democrats, that they're completely out of touch with America.
The K Street corridor, which is to say the lobbyist center of gravity in Washington, basically needs a blowtorching. I mean,
drain the swamp.
That's the swamp draining, and that's got to be done equally on the Democratic side and the Republican side. It's got to be across the board. Yeah. And the moment that Trump, and I don't think that he will, because he's a shrewd guy, if he were to be seen as doing more of that on the Democratic side than the Republican, that will cause problems with the folks who sent him there.
Look, if you could tell me that a year from now there is going to be robust debate and discussion in the United States Congress about the great issues of our time, and that people on both sides will be able to express their views fully, and that a vote will be taken, and you might win or you might lose, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. If we could see that kind of energy happening again in Washington, I'd be a very happy dude.
I think this gets back to how he will govern. I think it's going to be interesting to me and to others. To what extent is the vice president going to have a very active role?
Well,
when he was selected, it was
that's
said
on my list here, right here.
When he was selected, he was going to be responsible for domestic issues. We're going to see how much input he has, because he is there to represent both the conservative wing of the party and, to some extent, certainly the conservative establishment wing. So he's going to keep them in place, so the issues of the Supreme Court and all of those things are going to be taking place. But there's some other issues that are unresolved. These are bipartisan issues that got trapped in the political campaign when it looked like they were moving forward. And a key issue that can pick up a lot of ground is in the criminal justice reform area, because that's an area where progressives, where conservatives, I mean, all sides are together on the reforms that are needed. And Donald Trump during the campaign said virtually nothing about that issue. Hillary did. That's a bipartisan issue that I think will be one of the first demonstrations that President Trump really can represent all the people.
I got to tell you that if I had to list all of my lizard brain fears about the Trump administration, the biggest of them all is that Mike Pence is going to be running the government. That Trump won't be doing it. It'll be Mike Pence who will be taking care of the day-to-day operation of the government. And he is philosophically somebody who, I must tell you, I personally find repugnant. And I just don't know how to. I don't know how to.
But he's going to have to answer to a President Trump. And again, for those that are concerned about Mike Pence from some of the social issues, on some of the social issues, especially let's say in the area of gay rights, Donald Trump is going to make the call on that issue. It isn't going to be Mike Pence.
That's one of the reasons why I was telling the story about his building, is because he's a salesperson. And his approach to things is of a salesperson, trying to get the deal done, making the necessary compromises. If we see that kind of Donald Trump in Washington, then as we saw on the campaign, when he didn't agree with Mike Pence, he just sort of slapped him and let him know, I don't agree, we haven't talked about it, I disagree with him. And I think that's what will happen on some of those social issues, because first of all, because he's an entertainer and because he's in New York and who his friends are, these are his friends. So he's not going to suddenly turn against them because they've been his friends for a long time.
What's going on here?
I think this is the reality.
Well, this is the hope.
I want to wait. I want to another thing about Pence. I'm not asking you to change your philosophical view or your view of his philosophy, but I will tell you this: we were told umpteen times by any number of Democrats in 2000, over the last several years, Pence is on shaky ground. What he did in Indiana isn't what it seems to be. He was drowning and got a life preserver from Trump as the big ship sailed by. All of this. Not true. His lieutenant governor was reelected handily. Evan Bayh was disconnected from public office handily. The people of Indiana actually like what Pence was doing and like the record of accomplishment. And the person who was defeated in the gubernatorial race was the very same individual who had run against Mike Pence and who everybody in Indiana and the National Democratic Party thought had the best chance of prevailing in Indiana. And of course, what else do we know? First state to go onto the Trump thing was Indiana. So I think that we have to take...
I'm sorry, the first state to what?
To go onto the Trump tote board on the night of the election. Happened to be
because
Indiana.
It went up so fast.
It went up so fast. So I think that you say what's happening. Honestly, Ken, I believe that we are getting to points that have been there throughout, but were obscured by the politics, A, of the Democrats and B, of the media. And I have to say, I don't perceive in Trump any of the hard edges that might have been there with Ted Cruz. I mean,
Ted Cruz would have come nowhere near this.
There's no way to look at Trump, and I suggest respectfully, one should not look at Trump and see some sort of Hollywood casting, DC hothouse, think tank conservative. That's not who he is. No. He is somebody very different from that.
He is going to be, again, he's going to keep the Republican conservative base with the Supreme Court. That's the focus on that. Everything else is going to be moderate, maybe even to liberal, and he's going to look at that 30% of the vote that he got from the Hispanics, and I'll tell you, they're already working on a way to expand that for a re-election. They really are. And the other part of that constituency, again, it's the African Americans. It's working with the cities, following up on the things, on the speeches. I mean, on the 15 speeches he gave on that subject. Maybe more of them should have been in African American communities, but the speeches would. But again, the speeches. No Republican spent more time talking about that issue than Donald Trump. And the other piece of this, which is part of the coalition that he didn't have, but I think he will make efforts in, and that is some sort of a high-level role from Peter Thiel, the first openly gay American ever to address a Republican convention, who got a rounding applause, and even Donald Trump came back, congratulated the audience for basically accepting his position as being an openly gay man. So you're going to see that move. That's going to be the other big move insofar as constituency assessment in the next 4 years.
I do want to, since we're talking about
Can I just interrupt for just one quick? You did say in the last time we were here, Bruce, on that July 24th show, something that I thought was really important, which is that a major, if not the major reason for the ascent of Donald Trump is something that may not be readily visible to those of us who live in our blue bubbles, which is that he was a 14 or more year television star on The Apprentice. I mean, that is such an important point that when we look at this map, which by the way is not the states but counties, when you look at this map and you see that red obviously are the counties that Donald Trump won. These are the counties that watch TV in a way that the people in the blue dots don't. And they were watching The Apprentice, and they have a view of him that is foreign to many of us here, and that is it translated in some way into some kind of trust.
Well, it's not only trust, it's competence. I mean, for 14 years, as one of the most successful television shows, virtually always in the top 10, what did people see for 14 years? Regardless of what the demographic was, regardless of where you lived. They saw Donald Trump walk into a boardroom. He had about 7 or 8 people. He held them accountable.
Right. He held them accountable.
And you're fired. You know, you're doing a bad job at HHS, you're fired. And that's what people want to see.
Did he have women on the show? Yes. Did he have African Americans? Yes. Did he have Asian Americans?
Always attractive women, though.
He had, I think that the
inappropriate dresses and skirts.
What you saw on that program bred familiarity, and the familiarity became a basis upon which to see aspects of his personality, such as holding people accountable. And I think that gets to.
But it was all phony. I mean, that's the thing.
Well,
I'm
don't
not
know.
disagreeing
Tell the
with
people.
you.
I don't know
Except that
what
it was
is
a
phony.
TV
But
show.
it
was a
also
TV show.
Gave him the name recognition at a level that nobody else
and
had.
you say
and
phony.
in their living rooms on a regular basis. And that's a very different way to approach politics.
There's nothing phony about a 90-story building downtown.
No, I agree with that.
Okay, and I want to say this.
I'm just saying that please let's not overly dramatize the TV show.
Apprentice.
It was a piece of fluff.
No, but you raised it, I think, appropriately,
Right.
because Bruce raised it back in July.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about foreign affairs. I think this is an area where we're into a very new chapter in America. And frankly,
Yes,
I believe
it's
this
a very serious conversation.
Okay, I believe this chapter actually has a lot more to do with Barack Obama. I think Barack Obama was a reaction to Bush, and Barack Obama had his line, "We're not going to do stupid things." Okay, and Barack Obama, in the playing out of that, there was a withdrawal of the United States, a couple of steps back from a lot of different things. Now, I might be upset about that. I think it didn't work some places, maybe it worked some places, but Trump is now going to go, we have a high water mark of American involvement overseas or American intervention overseas. Then you see this withdrawal with Obama. I think Trump is going to try to move to a new place where we are, it's not as encyclopedic a withdrawal as you found under Obama, but it's nowhere close to the interventionism of Cheney and Bush. Okay, I think we're into the playing out or the.
In fact, he was critical of Hillary for being an interventionist.
He was critical of of the most recent president of his own party, such that that president was telling essentially people to go vote for Hillary. Then he was critical of Hillary. Okay, so I don't know where this all sorts out. It's like these other questions. Who knows where this sorts out? Because he's got James Woolsey and John Bolton and and obviously Newt Gingrich, and we all know that those are guys who have been okay with the use of American power overseas if necessary. But the world has gotten vastly more complicated and, in my opinion, vastly more scary since Obama took office, and Trump is not insensitive to those issues.
The world has gotten a lot more scary since Obama took office, and of course you say that sort of implying that Obama is the reason for it. I would say there are many, many reasons for that complication.
Yeah. It's not all
and
Obama's
that any president who had been in office during these last 8 years.
But mostly it's
Now,
Obama's
Ken,
fault.
let me
I'm
ask
sure
you a
you agree
question.
with
Are
that.
you worried?
97, 98.
They have their own show. I want to ask everybody: Are you worried about the perceived closeness between Putin and Donald Trump? I mean, does that bother you that one of our biggest enemies in the world at least maybe has some, phone call, friendship with the new president?
My knee-jerk reaction is that I'm terrified by it, but my more cerebral reaction is I really don't know how to react to that, because the immediate sense you get is that Putin is playing us. He interfered in the election. He had something to do with this. Now he's got himself a president that he thinks he can wrap around his little finger.
Well, I think it's a mirror reflection. They see each other in the mirror.
Yeah.
Do you think that he would perhaps invite Vladimir Putin to his inauguration?
Oh my gosh!
Don't be surprised.
Where did this come from? Is this just out of your mind, or do you have some inside
It's out of my mind. I'm
information?
just saying is that we have a situation. You alluded to it. We really don't know what this guy's going to do.
No,
but
we don't.
everything that he has done so far has been sort of beyond the box. And everybody said he wasn't going to win because he didn't have the ground. He has defied everything. And I'm just saying is there will be a lot of, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And I'm not so sure that wouldn't be such a bizarre, given all the discussion that's been going on. I wouldn't be totally surprised. That would be a signal to the world that we have a new leader in the United States.
I think that you saw in the Obama 2008 campaign, a huge point that Obama made, which I think helped him over McCain, was, I will speak to our adversaries without preconditions. Yeah. This was a statement he made. And I think that American people said, whatever they thought of Iraq, whatever they thought of Bush saying we've got to go to war in Iraq, whatever they thought of the surge, et cetera, people were war weary, and they said, okay, good, he's going to talk first, he's not going to war first. Okay, good. It may have worked out, may not have worked out, that historians will tell us, but I think that you're going to see in Trump an ability to speak to anybody. As we saw in the campaign, that Mexican president, the day he spent down in Mexico, and then coming back and giving his talk on immigration. And I know that Hillary characterized
that. Did you consider that to be a success?
I think that was a smashing success. I think that he got out of that day.
I'm fascinated by that, because it sure didn't play that way to me.
I know, because you're listening to liberal media, you're living in a blue bubble. But I think that
and you guys are different people.
The regular people out there saw him go to Mexico, have a meeting with the president of Mexico, not, so to speak, spit on the carpet, not fall on his face, not do a belly flop, and get his point across, get back to the United States, and then make a very definitive speech about immigration. And where does he turn up? 31 or 30.5% of the Hispanic vote.
Okay. We are. We've all hosted shows before, so I turn to all of you as co-hosts here. I don't want to let you guys go until we talk about the big media issue. I mean, we got to talk about the media.
I was just about to say that.
Can we
I'm so
do that?
glad you did.
All right.
I'd love to.
Where would you like to start?
It failed. It failed miserably.
Well, I'd like to start first.
You start first, because you've had the fewest words.
And then you can do the.
Your word count is the lowest.
You got to get going.
Is that
Delmarie
if
Cobb.
it weren't for the media, there wouldn't have been a Donald Trump as the nominee.
Well, that's for
The
darn
media helped him in every way. They were his partner in the primary. They gave him $3 billion of earned media, free media. He paid only $48 million for paid media, and they gave him $3 billion. a total that nobody else would have been able to, you wouldn't even buy that. So you can't even put a number on that.
Yeah.
Then the fact that you said he was in The Apprentice. So that was part of media. That was his love affair with media. All of a sudden, the media are his enemy. When you're in the general, the media is your enemy. They were still helping him all along the way. They never stopped helping him, but it was again red meat. These were the words that he needed to say: rigged election, the elite media, drain the swamp, make America great again. All of these are code words and red meat to his supporters.
How did the media help him in the general?
Oh, they helped him plenty. He got more coverage than anybody. He got more coverage than Hillary Clinton during the general. And every time there was a story on Hillary Clinton, I looked at it. I'm looking at a story, and you've got one reporter covering Hillary at every network, one reporter covering Donald Trump. So then you do your Donald Trump story, and then you do your Hillary story. And in the Hillary story, Donald Trump is in her story 5 times.
I can tell you 2 things. Number 1, they covered Comey like crazy, and the Comey thing is just bizarre.
Yes.
And number 2, the Billy Bush tape actually derailed a Hillary media strategy. Hillary was on, if you go back and you check the clips, you will find that Hillary was building up a narrative of Trump as dangerously unstable and somebody who's got to be kept from the nuclear codes, which, by the way, he is going to have the nuclear code. They're going to give him the little charge card that you put into the, okay. So anyway, and she was getting resonance with that. And I think there's an argument to be made that when that Billy Bush tape, this isn't a conspiracy, but the Billy Bush thing comes out and it becomes the dominant topic of conversation. It takes all the air out of the room with respect to Hillary's conversation about him being dangerously, personally, mentally unstable, and somebody who's got to be separated from the nuclear football. I think that, I'm not saying the media was on his side. I think that that was gross, and I think that they didn't listen to the folks in those red counties out there. They had no interest in those people, and I had the privilege of being on Channel 9, so I didn't get to see stuff that was going on MSNBC and Fox on the night of the election. But from what I've heard or what I've seen on YouTube, it's unconscionable to me. Martha Raddatz almost bursting into tears. I mean, these people were well over any understanding.
Where was Martha Raddatz?
Channel 7.
On ABC. She was on ABC, and she started talking about the folks in uniform overseas and how Trump doesn't know anything about them and doesn't know how to be commander-in-chief.
There needs to be, and there won't be, because the media will not acknowledge that there's a problem. Even today, they will not acknowledge the problem. But the heads of ABC, CBS, to a lesser extent, NBC, and certainly CNN and MSNBC.
And Fox?
Fox to an extent, they missed it. They totally missed it. But even their analysis, I mean, this is what frosts me.
I'm sorry, they missed what? They missed that Trump was...
They missed that what the story was. They had the polls. They were going with the Billy Bush stories, and then they were going with the Comey stories. They were going with all these stories. They weren't talking about what the vast, red counties of America were really interested in. And yet, they very smugly talked about the polls, and it looks like Hillary's going to do it. I mean, Chuck Todd last Sunday was talking about 15 different ways, that Hillary could win, and there's no way that Donald Trump could. I mean, he lost the reputation of that show was lost in the way that Chuck Todd conducted himself in this campaign, in my view.
Even
he ought to be
in
fired.
this campaign period, there was barely any talk about any issues, because it was all about sensationalism.
I disagree, Delmarie. Let's just, if you go back and you check the record, anybody who's terrified of Trump now can go back and check the record. They will see that he methodically gave a series of white paper policy speeches that were not covered, that were ignored by the national media.
That's what I'm saying, the media.
Okay.
That's what my point.
Okay, fine.
They didn't cover either one substantively.
Well, I would agree. I generally agree with that. I would generally agree with that, and I think that happens every 4 years. But in this particular case,
Not
you
to the
have
degree it
people.
happened this year.
What frosts me is when I look at former or people that just within hours are off a political payroll, they are showing up as political analysts. Matthew Dowd on ABC, look at what he said last Sunday. 99% chance that Donald Trump was going to lose big.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are wrong. Anna Navarro is a paid hack by the Bush family. She stayed on CNN to the very end. I mean, you can go chapter and verse. They're out there. I mean, it's ridiculous. And Mike Murphy, who hasn't had a winning campaign for 15 years, is constantly quoted. That's the source that NBC goes to. So the Republican sources, the Steve Schmitz, all of the Republican sources that they go to, they're wrong. They're losers.
And
they keep going to the same people over and over again.
I think generally speaking, if you go out on that map and you go to some Republican meeting in Salinas, Kansas, and you talk about Murphy or a Schmidt or some of these guys, the guy on the circus, if they were to show up there, they wouldn't be seen as Republican. They wouldn't be understood as. They would not be perceived. They're nowhere within the coordinates of Republican.
Right.
They are when they show up out there. They're Upper East Side swills or Upper West Side swills.
This wasn't really what I was asking about.
Okay.
What I was asking about is the fact that we just live in an entirely different media universe than the four of us grew up in.
That's a fragmentation.
And maybe we're the ones who are putting our red hats on and saying, make the media great again, because we remember there was a time when Walter Cronkite was great and we want that back. That's all gone. And if I put you in charge of CNN tomorrow and you in charge of MSNBC, just because I want to do that, because I'm mean that way.
I'll take the job.
I'll take the job too.
Yeah, I mean, so would I. I mean, would you be able to substantively change the way these...
Well,
actually, no.
it goes back.
Yes, you would. I answer. But you know what? I really am not talking about MSNBC and CNN,
No.
The
You're
big
talking
three
about
on
CBS.
cable. I'm talking about those guys
can
are
I say this?
dinosaurs.
Can I say this?
And everything is
I think
if you don't get it on this, it's not real, right?
20 years ago, you assigned me an interview at a radio station that'll go unnamed, whose initials are WBEZ, and that was, I think, Ed Joyce, and he had written Primetime, Bad Time, this inside story of CBS. And I went and I interviewed him. I read the book, I interviewed him, and I don't think there's a thing that's happened since then that vitiates any of the observations that he made in that book. And that book essentially comes down to this. Under Paley, we were special. After Paley, we're the same. That's it. But it's a fascinating book, and I recommend it. If you haven't read Primetime's Bad Times CBS, go get it. But that has denuded the network news gathering model.
But when you talk to the producers at the stations, they all say, and especially the ones who were there, have been there all along and are still there and remember the good old days, they are, forlorn over the fact that if it trends, they have to cover it.
Clickbait.
And that's what they say.
Yeah, well, that's because it's all being driven by social media. Everything's being driven by social media, and Donald Trump will be the first truly Twitter president. Right. I mean, he got his job through Twitter, and he will probably, I have no doubt that he will continue to have that direct line to people through his Twitter account, even when he's president. You don't think so?
I have to go.
I know you do. Let's cut it down. He's got to go.
I'm late lately.
But part of it, let me just make this one. Part of it is the CBS, NBC's, ABC, Fox, and or MSNBC and CNN.
They can hear you.
Someone has got to move their network news operations to Kansas City, not to Chicago, because Chicago is as blue as New York and LA. You got to move it to Kansas City, which means that your producers, your directors, everyone within the making of that news every day, they don't live in New York, Chicago, or Los Angeles. That's what you got to do.
They wouldn't all be
Dallas,
someplace in the middle.
And they wouldn't all be women in short skirts sitting on a white vinyl couch.
23 years old, right?
23 years old, yes. Chris has to go because he's got to apply for a job.
No, I'm speaking at Loyola University.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were.
There's 4,000 of them. There's 4,000 of them he's got to fill.
Right.
Oh, no, I'm going. I agreed to a.
And Delmarie too. There's got to be a job for you among those 4,000.
Exactly.
There's just got to be.
I know. I'm going to call Omarosa.
Yeah, there you go. You got an in.
Bruce doesn't need one. He's got Beyond the Beltway. So that's, and me
He's got the
too.
museum.
Right. All right. So thank you very much for joining us today and watching these three friends of mine, Bruce DuMont, Delmarie Cobb, and Chris Robling. Chris has got to go. We've all got to go. We are so far over time. Thanks for watching. Back again next week with yet another show. Who knows what we'll be talking about next week, but tune us in anyway. And you can watch us anytime by going to this address right here and see this show over again, because you're going to want to put it on repeat and just watch it over and over. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Bye.